She spent more than 3 years and 1,000 days in prison. I'm Barkha Dutt, here with the Mojo Story. My guest today is human rights lawyer and activist Sudha Bhardwaj. She has, of course, made national and international headlines after being arrested in 2018 on charges of being a Maoist. She was arrested under the draconian UAPA Act, which has continued to be in play, taking some of our best known activists behind prison bars in the recent years. The UAPA, of course, was introduced by the Congress during its time in government and has continued to be embraced by the BJP. With Sudha Bhardwaj today, we're going to talk about her life in prison, but also about the compact between the citizen and the state. What did her 3 years in jail do to her understanding of that sacred relationship defined at its heart by the constitutionalist spirit of India? Sudhaji, it's great to see you, and I know, and I should alert our audience कि आप केस के बारे में बात नहीं कर सकती. Your bail conditions forbid you from talking about the Bhima Koregaon case in which you were arrested with accusations of having Maoist links. So if our audience notices that we can't talk a lot about that, this is the reason. How does it feel to be outside of prison? Is it slightly, or was it slightly disorienting at first? There is a kind of Stockholm syndrome. You get used to a completely different life. You came out to your daughter, of course, who must have missed you tremendously. But you also mentioned in an interview to the BBC that it was like moving from a small jail to a larger jail. What did you mean by that?
As you know, Barkha, 30 years of my life I've spent working in Chhattisgarh. First as a trade unionist and then as a human rights lawyer. So Mumbai, where I'm confined to be, restrained to be at the moment by the bail conditions, is an alien city to me. I'm lucky to have a few friends, and of course, they're my sort of life support at the moment. But I really long to go back to the places of my work and my friends where my daughter is studying, etc. So in that sense, yes, the feeling of freedom is a little partial. Yes.
The feeling of freedom is a little partial. And, I was looking at that photograph. I think Indira Jaising had shared it for all of us when you walked out of jail. I want to go back to it. What struck everybody was your smile. You were literally laughing ear to ear. And I was reading this beautiful, I think, article by Ajaz Ashraf on you. And he said what really stayed with him was that you're still laughing, that you're still smiling, and that you have an uproarious laugh, and you do not seem angry.
Yes. Well, Barkha, one has a choice whether to cry through something or to laugh through something, and I think I just prefer to laugh. And yes, sometimes the situation is so absurd, it's sort of Kafkaesque even. And the other thing which I realized when I went inside prison is no doubt, it has been 3 years. It's not been easy. It's been a painful time. But there are many, many people far, far more unfortunate than I have been. And my heart really went out to them. When you're in the midst of so much misery, it's difficult to be miserable yourself. You have to do something to help others as far as you can. And I
but
think,
aren't you a little bitter? कभी तो आप रोई होंगी जेल में, कभी तो आप किसी पे चिल्लाई होंगी.
नहीं, देखिए, हाँ, एक दो बार तो जरूर हुआ है. और मुझे तो एक बार याद है जब सबसे पहले यरवड़ा जेल में गए थे, और पहले मुझे हॉस्पिटल बैरक में रखा गया था, और बाद में जहाँ शोमा सेन जी थी, जो सेपरेट सेल्स थे फांसी यार्ड के अंदर, वहां अचानक लेके गए. And it was a very abrupt thing which happened late in the evening, and I remember all my stuff. Chalo, and you heard it very quickly, and everything was chucked into the cell, and clang, you could hear the lock being turned. And somehow that was, it brought tears to my eyes. But then I could hear the sound of Shomaji. Sudha, are you all right? Have you had dinner? I said, no, I haven't. So then she requested the constable. She sent a part of her dinner to me. So yeah, so yes, there are certain times, like when the first time you're taken to the jhatti room and you're told, strip and squat, and it's suddenly it comes home that, oh, now I'm a
You're
criminal,
in jail.
so I'm
Yeah.
going to be treated like that. Yeah. And yeah, or for example, I sometimes used to get very annoyed when the guards would take us to the court, and maybe my daughter is standing far away, and I want to just give her a hug. But if the guards are very strict, they would say, no, 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 madam, aap aisa nahi kar sakti. um, or then I would feel, that this is really wrong. Or my, union comrades would come from very, very far away to meet me, and they would be harassed by the, IO or the other people, the other. This I'm talking about Pune. Um, so that used to be, once I did lose my temper, and then in fact I addressed the court and I said, just because they are poor people doesn't mean they should be harassed. This is my family, and they should be
Yeah.
allowed to come and meet me. Yeah.
But tell us about this Phansi yard. It obviously you were placed with inmates who were on death row, जिनको फांसी लगने वाली थी, और आप इतनी आराम
जी.
से कहती है फांसी यार्ड. थोड़ा बताइए इसके बारे में.
जी, तो फांसी यार्ड ऐसा होता है कि कई सारे सेल्स लाइन में होते हैं. उसके बाहर एक बरामदा जैसा, एक कॉरिडोर जैसा होता है, और ये पूरी चीज मतलब एक पिंजरे के अंदर है, समझ लीजिए. वो पिंजरा जो है वो ग्राउंड के एक कोने में रखा हुआ है, ऐसा समझ लीजिए. सो we had the bars of our cells, and then the bars outside the corridor. So two sets of bars to look through. And then we could see, the ground where the children used to play when the bandi was opened, and the women used to sit around in the sun and eat their food. There were trees and so on. Actually, Yerwada jail is of 1926. It's a large compound, and it has many trees and so on. Yes, but the two women next to us, they had been in jail for 25 years, and they had just had a stay on their death sentence. And I'm very pleased to tell you, I think it was one of the most happiest news after coming out, was that their death sentence has been commuted now to life imprisonment. And since they've already been there for 25 years, I do hope they get released soon. And
But in that
I
moment, that's great to hear. But जब पहली रात आपने फांसी यार्ड में बिताई, you said earlier that you realized on that first day when they asked you to, to strip, when you had to use the jail bathrooms, when you were taken to this death row part of the jail, that you were now in the eyes of the law a potential criminal and accused. But now you're taken to this part of the jail where people are to be executed. That first night there, what did you think? What did you feel?
Yeah, well, what did I think and feel? I just told myself, well, one has to go through this. I kept looking at the wall. There were a few chipkilis on the wall. I was just watching them. I was watching the strange shapes which are made by the cracks in the wall and the patches, and so on and so forth. I sort of and in fact at that time I was very scared of my neighbor, who was one of the two sisters, because we had heard that they are very, obviously after being 25 years, they were very cantankerous, and used to get stressed out. And I was terrified because she shouted from me there, please don't snore. खराटे नहीं मारना. And I said, oh my God, कहीं कराटा ना निकल जाए. तो डर के मारे तो मैं सो ही नहीं रात में.
Well, you're able to see the humor in this recollection now, but I can't even imagine how traumatic it was for you. Now, again, to underline, we can't ask you about the case. We can't ask you about the specific allegations. You're one of several people activists who were arrested in the Bhima Koregaon case. We even had Father Stan Swamy, who died while he was in custody. So many, many, many sort of tragedies have taken place on the sides of this prolonged hearing in this particular case, Sudhaji. But on the UAPA Act itself, because I know you can speak about it, this is actually shows you across parties how governments can actually stretch themselves in applying a law that is meant for actually the rarest of rare applications. And to those people, especially young people, who do not know what is so draconian about this law, how was it even possible for you, for example, to spend 3 years inside jail without bail? Talk a little bit about the UAPA.
Yes, the UAPA, you see, basically, the concept of the UAPA was that certain unlawful organizations have to be banned. And those unlawful organizations subsequently, any association with these unlawful organizations also becomes criminalized. Now, the fact is that there are associations and associations. There may be an association of being a brother or a wife or a husband or a son or a daughter. That association cannot be criminalized. The association may be of being a lawyer to somebody. How can that association be criminalized? Or a doctor to somebody. How can that association be criminalized? But this act has a way of criminalizing any kind of association. And there are some parts of it. For example, in the notion of, let us say, frontal organizations, which is extremely vague, and where even organizations which have never been notified are presumed to be unlawful. Now, that is something actually the government, one responsibility of the government when it has a very draconian law is to also make the functioning of that law very clear to the citizen. You see, when the citizen commits a crime, they should know that they're committing a crime. Okay. Yeah. So if the citizen is joining a certain organization or participating in certain organization, it should be that she or he should be very well aware that what they're doing is a crime. Yeah. The problem comes when unlawful organizations or in the name of frontal organizations of unlawful organizations, you actually include a host of other organizations which you have never made clear to the public that they are unlawful.
And this, I think,
is highly problematic. Highly problematic.
Yeah. And it has come down, in fact, now to the courts, and judges, can be so. In our legal system, and you're a lawyer, so you know this, everything depends on which judge is hearing the case, as opposed to the American system where precedent actually defines it. And I was reading somewhere that a judge in Chhattisgarh once asked you whether you pay income tax, and your answer was...
Well, yes, that was actually the then Chief Justice, and he was a very gentlemanly person, and he had invited me and to his chamber, and he was asking me whether I would like to come on the other side, that is, whether I would like to be elevated as a judge. And the first question, of course, he said, "But do you pay income tax? You have to pay income tax." I said, "Lordship, I don't have enough income to pay income tax." So then, of course, but still, would you be interested? Then I very respectfully told him that I'm very happy and I'm very extremely honored that you have said this to me. But I think they need to be good people on both sides, both on the bench and in the bar, and then only we can probably get justice. And in any case, Barkha, I was a person who was made a lawyer by my union, by the workers at the age of 40. I mean, younger people do apply for, competitive exams to become a judge or to become a magistrate or additional sessions judge. These posts are created by writing a competitive exam. It's only at the high court level that people can be directly elevated from the bar.
But but when you talk about not having enough income to pay income tax, I think a lot of people don't know your extraordinary journey to becoming a human rights lawyer. As you said, at the age of 40, you became a lawyer, you became an activist, but you actually studied math, which I failed in school, I have to confess. You studied math at IIT. you were born in the United States of America and you gave up your American citizenship. So let's talk a little bit about both of these things. When you were at IIT, what was the life you imagined for yourself then?
Well, when I was in school, I loved maths and I loved history and I loved literature. Now, if there was anybody available to give me such a crazy combination of subjects, I would have gone for it. Unfortunately, the times were more difficult, and you had to either go to the science stream or the arts stream. And normally, those who were good in maths did go to the science stream, so I went to the science stream. Though I was not very interested in engineering, so I basically sort of went with the intention of doing maths itself. So my idea that time was to get a degree in maths, and I was fond of teaching. I always was fond of teaching. I come from a family of teachers. My mother, my grandfather were all teachers. So I did think of myself as a teacher. But somewhere along the way, I think that the involvement with workers, with the children of workers, etc., and then coming to know of Shankar Guhani Yogi's union, which I found to be something very different, a very different kind of union, a union which runs schools and runs hospitals and tries to get people off liquor, and very creative union, not just confined to economic demands of the workers, but to all kinds of social and cultural issues. I thought that I could do the best. I mean, I had education and I wanted to do the best for those children. So I initially started as a teacher in the school, but later on, Comrade Niyogi probably saw other skills as possible and asked me to come into the organization. Yes.
Now you did that rare thing of giving up your American citizenship, and I want you to tell us how you did it, how old you were, and then I have some questions about it. But what made you? You were very young when you did it. What made you do it, and describe how you did it?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, till I was 21, the citizenship didn't bother me so much because anyway. I was always in an Indian context and I was quite happy with it. After that, however, I had to register as a foreigner, which meant that, for example, when I was in IIT Kanpur, I would register at the FRRO at Kanpur. I would have to inform them every time I left Kanpur city, or even, to go home to Delhi and so on. And somehow this idea of being surveilled perpetually by Americans, I mean, it felt very strange to me because I felt very Indian and I was, in India, sort of living among Indians, and to have the feeling that, the American embassy is surveilling where I'm going and I have to tell it every 6 months and I have to sort of renew my visa and so on and so forth. And as I got involved in IIT itself with the mess workers and with, we were teaching Dalit children in a close by village, and so on and so forth. I sort of made up my mind that this is where I want to stay and work, and I'm really not
And
interested.
how old were you then? How
By
old were
that
you
time,
then?
I was about 23, and
Okay.
at the age of 23, I gave up the citizenship.
And
And
you drove you went to the American embassy, I think, in Delhi, and had
yes, yes,
quite an interesting
I
conversation.
had a very amusing experience. You see, when we went, I went with my mother and two of my mother's friends, colleagues of hers, both ladies. So we went to the door. We went to the gate of the embassy, and there was an enormous line for visas. So when we sort of marched up, the guard very scornfully says, "Line, piche jaiye, madam, piche jaiye." I said, "No, no, I am an American citizen." Oh, he looked at my passport. He was quite surprised. Oh, then you can come in, he said. So all of us went in, and we went and met the consul. And the consul said, "So what is it that you want to do?" So I said, "I want to surrender my American nationality and because I wish to take an Indian nationality." He looked at me as if I had gone out of my mind. Then he said to me, "Are you quite sure you've discussed it with your father or your husband?" I mean, he seemed to feel that these four kinky women have come here with an idea of giving up nationality, and they're probably not consulted any
the men.
respectable male of the family. And of course, all four women, we were enraged by this statement. And we said, no, 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 we have already thought it very well over. Please give us the form. And then the poor gentleman is rummaging around and asking his clerks to rummage around. And then he says, very regretfully, he says, sorry, madam, I don't think anybody has used it yet. So I'll just call for it. Please come next week. So, and do give it a thought, he said. Do give
And
it a
I
thought.
think, and I read that he reminded you that you cannot join the US military once you give
That's
it up.
exactly right. And then when we went the next week, and he said, so are you quite sure? I said yes. He said, please understand that some things are irreversible. You would never be able to join the American army. So I looked at him and I said, I do not want to join the American army. But obviously for him that was a big
But tell
and
me, as somebody who did that, to have yourself arrested on charges of being what is loosely today called anti-national, right? How does it? And I'm saying it in this light way because it's such a meaningless, Twitter phrase almost. But it must have hurt tremendously that you, in a way, could have had a life in a different country. You chose this country, unlike many people who are simply born in it. You chose India, and you're being treated today in the eyes of the law and by many people in the court of public opinion as an anti-national. Does that enrage you? Does it hurt you?
I I just feel very surprised by it because Barkha, my life has been an open book. I mean, I've uh, you know uh, I worked in the trade union, and as a unionist, as a lawyer, I've always been on public platforms, and whatever I've said very openly. I've written, I've talked, I've spoken, I've taught. I remember even in the National Law University, there was a training workshop for the CRPF people. And I gave that talk. And just before I went in, the one of the administrative officers said, "Madam, would you mind if we recorded this?" I said, "Sure, go ahead." So, I mean, I never considered myself anything but absolutely transparent. So, and but I do know that when we worked for contract laborers, there were employers who hated us. I do know that my union leader was murdered. He was assassinated, Shankar Bhuani. I do know that when we, raised complex issues, about maybe Adivasis falsely implicated or in a fake encounter, though we were participating in absolutely legal bodies, in judicial commissions of inquiry, before the High Court, before the Supreme Court, yet there was this, we could sense this hostility from the state. And uh, yeah, I always thought, no, it's because I love people. And I think in a country, the most important thing is the people. I mean, one doesn't love a country for its geography or its territory. I love the country for its people. I think I have tried to do the most I could possibly do in my circumstances for the people,
Do,
and
do
I will
you,
continue to do so.
but do you feel cynical after your 3 years in jail? As somebody wrote, you spent 3 Republic days in prison, and you had a very interesting account of how inmates are actually very aware of their rights, and Republic Day and government announcements and changes in law are followed with great interest. But first, talk a little bit about the compact, the relationship of a citizen and a state is what defines, as it's the people, but it's also, when you say India, what you feel. Like, for me, this is home, because when someone says India, as you said, you feel Indian, and a lot of it is intangible, but a lot of it is the power and the identity we derive from our constitution, and from those beautiful
Exactly.
ideas in the constitution. Uh, when you spent these 3 Republic days in prison, did it alter your idea of the Indian state and your relationship with it? Have you become cynical? Have you become angry?
Well, I always used to do legal aid. I always used to be working for the poorest of the poor. I know that they don't have much of a voice because I worked for workers, I worked for Adivasis, I worked for people whose lands were being acquired by huge corporates and who are fighting environmental devastation or mining or whatever. And it was always a David and Goliath fight. Uh, but I think after going behind the bars, what I realized was that a citizen behind the bars uh, is so dependent. I mean, it is totally cut off, particularly in these Corona years. When you could not be taken to court, you could not be. I mean, there were no mulakats. Your family couldn't come and meet you. It was a time when this here you are absolutely helpless, and I think that is the time that I realized that the mandate in the constitution, which says that you must be given legal aid. You see, all this creation of a legal aid
Yeah.
authority, a Supreme Court legal aid authority, and a High Court legal aid authority, and a district legal aid authority. The whole idea is to you know uh, is to give a level playing field for a citizen, and so that when comes to citizen versus state, then the citizen has to be adequately legally represented, and that I think I found severely missing. So in my mind, apart from all these other deprived groups, the under trials became a group in my mind as one group which
Yeah.
seriously requires attention, particularly in days like this where we were in a pandemic. There was overcrowding, there were health issues, and there were serious legal aid issues. So I'm really contemplating that I should maybe file a PIL or something to get better legal aid. Unless we make the legal aid better, we are not rising up to the mandate which is there in the constitution.
But you don't sound cynical at all. You still believe in the same enabling spirit of the constitutionalism that has defined this republic. You still have that belief intact.
Well, I would say I'm a fortunate person, and there are some fortunate people who have rights, but we need those rights to percolate to everyone.
Yeah.
I was very lucky. I had very excellent lawyers. I had a large number of friends who were trying their best. I had my daughter outside. I had my union comrades outside. So, but when there's an under trial pushed behind the bars, who maybe doesn't have a family who visits them, who's maybe under a very grave offense, who doesn't have money for a lawyer, who and I met numerous people like that who have been there for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, um, and they're quite uh,
Yeah.
frustrated, hopeless. Uh, so my thing was that despite everything, despite one's uh, definitely it was not a pleasant experience, but I think I would really do that experience justice only if I did something for them. I mean, and I would seriously recommend that all judges should at least spend a week, maybe in a sabbatical,
In
in a
jail?
jail just to see what it feels like. Because when you refuse bail,
Yeah.
the question you should be asking yourself is not, shall I give this person bail? The question you should be asking yourself is, does this person need to go to jail? Do we
Yeah.
need to put this person in jail? Is he or she really going to abscond if we leave them out? Is he or she really going to tamper with witnesses? Is he or she really a threat to society? You know, if we don't have that, then it's very, that rhetorical question, why should I give you bail? Really, it has to be turned on its head.
Yeah, and I quite like this idea of judges spending a year in prison. That would be quite something. But I want to talk a
Oh,
little
we are
bit
ready to give them
about.
the best barrel. We'll give them the very best barrel. And maybe we'll just keep 5 of them at a time so that they don't feel too crowded either. But just the sense of being in jail, And each
Yeah.
time you're refusing somebody, you're adjourning a bail hearing, you're
Yeah.
refusing somebody. And the other thing is that in the courtroom, there should be a running ticker which tells him how many people are under his custody in the jail. Like I am handling 300 cases, and in those 300 cases, 700 people are in jail whom I have
Yeah.
sent.
Yeah.
And okay, now it's gone up to 701. Oh, it's
Yeah.
704 now. That sense of responsibility of somebody being in your custody has to
Yeah.
very much be there with the judge. It
I mean,
has
I
to
can
be there.
I can visualize that ticker, and maybe that would make them look at it differently. But you did speak about watching the Republic Day through prison bars, through thin prison bars. You spoke about inmates avidly following news. You spoke about them rooting even for Shah Rukh Khan's son Aryan.
Oh, yes.
How talk about that?
Yeah. Well, actually, in Yerwada, we were in the separate cells. We didn't have a TV there. But
Yeah,
in Baikala, we were in the barrack. So one thing that I noticed is that jail news, court news,
yeah,
is something which all the inmates look forward. I mean, uh, every now and then they'll come rushing to me and say, "Didi, वो पेपर में क्या आया कि सब लोगों को छोड़ना है, ऐसा आया ना पेपर में?" I would say, wait a minute, सब लोगों को छोड़ने का नहीं आया है. ये बोला है कि जिसका 7 साल के कम की सजा है, उन्हें छोड़ा जा सकता है. But there would be these hopes, rising and falling throughout the pandemic. And I remember, yes, when Aryan was in jail, the television would be on news 24 hours. I mean, normally we had to beg and pray and say, please, 10 minute के
न्यूज
लिए
लगा
NDTV
दीजिए.
दिखा दो, please.
हाँ.
And, because the fight over the remote would be a big issue. But yeah, they were. And, they would watch it with immense interest and say, Arey, yeah, this boy has not even had anything seized from him. This is very unfair. I hope this kid
Yeah.
gets out. And of course, some others would say, how come he got his High Court hearing so soon? Within 3 days.
Yeah.
But generally, there was a atmosphere of sympathy
Yeah.
towards
Yeah.
the prisoner. Yeah.
Really sort of fascinating raw accounts from inside prison. I do want to ask you in the end that, while you remain optimistic, you continue to laugh through it all, it must have been really tough for your daughter and for her to be outside, for her to constantly worry about you. When we last sort of read up, you were saving and finding ways to fund her education. And so talk a little bit about that. For as tough as you are, how did you navigate that?
Oh, yes. That is still, I have not yet navigated it fully. I'm still navigating it.
Yeah.
Actually, my whole decision to come to Delhi was basically because, her career was at a crucial point. She was going to join college. And as a person who had mostly done, pro bono cases and worked with, unions and mass organizations, I really had no savings to speak of. So I had thought that I would teach for a few years and try to at least give her a decent education. And I was arrested. So, there she was, either she was in Delhi or she was in Bhilai, and, she could meet me only once in 3 months. Often, so it, and her very sad and miserable letters would, I would be able to, by the time I got a letter and replied to it, it would be, 1 month. There's so much of, censorship and scanning from the jail. Um, so yes, and I'm, it's because, of my organization, my friends, and the support that they have given her. But there's still a long way to go, and even now I'm searching for a place and work and so on, so that I'd like to do something for her. Yes,
So you're
I
saying
still have to do it.
you did not have enough money to pay for her college education when you were
Well, I
arrested?
didn't. Yes, I mean that is more or less the first job I did in my life at the age of 58. So before that, of course, we were all living together.
Yeah.
Sort of our organization would support our basic needs and so on. But I wanted her to have the choices which I had had,
Yes.
and to know what she wanted to study, and she should not be constrained by anything. This I was very I really wanted it very much, and I will try to give that to her. I think
And
she
and
deserves.
as you say, you're looking for work, and you are a person who is out on bail facing a UAPA charge, and you're still
Yes,
laughing
exactly.
through it all because you know that most people would be too scared, too fearful to give you that work, right? I mean, that's the reality of your life now. So how are you going to cope with that?
Well, I'm looking around. You see, there's some work which I will do regardless of whether I'm paid or not, which is uh, helping out some of the prisoners, or maybe doing some work for the labor unions here. I mean, that is a part of my life. I would do it regardless. But yes, I would be trying to apply to various institutions for maybe some kind of research, or writing work. I hope that I get something.
Well, that you can smile through everything you've been through. I think is the most extraordinary part of this conversation. You've had many different changes in your life. As you said, you became a lawyer at the age of 40. You were a teacher before that. You're now looking for work. Where do you see your next decade as we close? Where do you see it? Do you see it running from court to court, just fighting these cases? What do you see for yourself ahead?
Well, in the foreseeable future, the next few years, I appear to be in Mumbai. Uh, whether it really depends whether my other co-accused are released on bail or not, and whether the trial starts or not, how long the trial is to take. These are all issues, and so I'm sort of I have reconciled to the idea of being here, and because in a certain way Mumbai is a very sort of it's a working people city. It's
Yeah.
uh, it may be expensive to live in, but everybody is busy, and some kind of work or the other one will find. I am confident about it. I will do that. And
Well,
yes, Barkha, wherever one is, uh, there are there are workers around you, and there are people around you who need help. I hope I can put whatever I have learned and experienced in these years to some use for somebody. I'd be
well,
happy
I
with that.
I can only say your optimism is both infectious and inspiring. Thank you, Sudhaji. Thank you, and take care. And I hope your daughter is able to pursue her dreams. Thank you very much for talking
Yes.
to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Barkha.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.